Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
I've mentioned this from time to time. Maybe I've mentioned it on here. I don't know. I have a friend. I go to church. I'm Catholic. I don't hide from that. I am Catholic. I don't push it on people. My religion is my religion, and my faith is my faith. But I had a friend say to me once, well, he started out by asking how my faith journey is. And I'm like, that's kind of a weird question to have with somebody over coffee. But then he said, Frank, you're a stealth evangelist. I'm like, what do you mean stealth evangelist? I know what an evangelist is. I know what stealth is. But what do you mean by putting those two words together? Do I take offense by this or whatever? And so I just asked him, what do you mean? And he said, well, all the things you talk about, the things you write about, that's all stuff that's in the Bible, all stuff that, Jesus talked about. You just don't wrap it in religion. And like, oh, okay. I don't know if that's a compliment or whatever, but that's just, that's who I am. And that's who I'm comfortable being. Today I have on the program Andrea Anderson, and she is an accredited business coach for Christian business owners who want to make more money in business in God's strength and not their own. And she's the host of a podcast called The Business Detox, and that helps train coaches at Christian, hard for me to say, Christian Coaching Mastery. And she's a board member of She Steps Forward International. I wanted to get Andrea on. I've known Andrea for maybe a year now because she's not stealth. She's not stealth at all. She has built a whole business around Christian beliefs, God, Jesus Christ, and has really attracted people to her because of that. And, there's somebody for everybody out there, and there are groups for everybody. So it's, I talk to a lot of business people who are just straight business, and, wanted to bring somebody on who really has a different angle and just the challenges in building that sort of network. So, Andrea, welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me here.
So where did this come from? I mean, nobody goes to school and says, well, I want to do, whatever. I didn't go to school to say I want to be a networking person, but there was a story there.
Exactly. Yeah. For the longest time, I thought I would be a vet, and then my math grade said otherwise. So I switched to marketing communications, and that's actually where I had started my first job in the professional world. And then I was in that until I started having my family. But as far as where I came to the business coaching and specifically overtly saying that I work with Christians, so that was definitely God. First, the thing that I love to share first with people about faith is I was not always a believer in Jesus Christ. There was a period in my teens and 20s where I was atheist, highly hostile to God and all things religion. At one point I said, I will never, ever, ever be a Christian. And yet here I am. And so the way that I came to coaching was I had a business at the time, an organizing business with a friend. And it was really early on in that business that I was sensing there's more going on for people than they just didn't know how to organize their stuff. And the idea of going into a space, getting it looking all nice and organized, but walking away and it going back to chaos didn't sit well with me. So it was literally in a time of prayer where I was asking God, how do I actually help people on a transformative level? And for the first time ever, I heard almost audibly life coach. And this was in the early 2000s when the coaching industry was virtually unheard of. And I was like, what the heck is a life coach? And I said, okay, if this is you, God, and not me, I'll Google it and it will come up, which it did. So then I got my coaching certification, and then there's like a long story in between that. But eventually, I've landed at I'm here to help in the business space. And for anybody I would say of any faith background, when you are a business owner, there is that question, am I going to do this from a faith-based perspective and be overt, or is it not going to be quite front and center? That, like you said, you're more quiet about it. You're the self-evangelist part about it, right? But we can never separate what we do from our faith or values, even if we're not saying it overtly. That it's impossible to do that because it's core belief. It's the only difference is, are you saying it front and center or not? And I know that I am called primarily to the body of Christ. So that's where I landed on this.
Now, were your parents religious?
So yeah, it's a good question. We grew up in what I would call a culturally Christian home. So if you had asked us if we were Christian, we would have said yes, because we went to church. We did the churchy things. So baptism, going to church mostly weekly. My parents were involved in beyond, just services. I remember helping in Sunday school, went through confirmation, communion, like all of the stuff. But we didn't understand that that doesn't actually make you a Christian. What makes you Christian is choosing Jesus as your Lord and Savior and having a relationship. It's a big difference, but it's one that often, unfortunately, people miss. And my parents missed it. We missed it. So when we moved to the States, because this was in Canada, we moved to the States and we didn't find a church that had that same kind of feel to it. And when you aren't asking God where to go, then it's just almost like picking a restaurant. It's like, well, we moved to a place, we don't like the restaurant, so we're not going to go anymore. We'll just eat at home. And anyway, that started the period of my life too, where I learned about evolution, decided that explained away the need for God, entered this period of atheism and agnosticism. And it wasn't until one of my sisters started to, it was called Alpha. Alpha course is mostly in Canada and the UK. It is present here in the United States, but it is considered a safe space for people to ask faith-based questions. And that's where she started to really understand the difference between going to church and having a relationship with Jesus. It took the death of my grandfather for me to finally be sincere in examining if my beliefs, if what I was believing at the time was actually true, or if I needed to reconsider. And I reconsidered.
Okay. When God, I hate this word. When you transitioned, I know that word is spoiled now. I don't know.
That's okay. Yeah, it's fine. Yes.
We know what we're talking about here.
What you're talking about. Yes.
When you leaned back into your faith and Christianity, did it alienate people? Did people come out of the woodwork and say, "Oh my God, I can finally have a different conversation with you"? And it was probably a mixed bag. I don't know.
It's a good question, because I've moved countries in my life. So we moved to the States when I was 12. Then we moved to England when I was 16, and then went to university in Canada, and then came back to Cleveland. So all that to say, especially before the era of social media, maintaining deep personal connection is not part of my story.
Okay.
So I think it would have been different had I stayed in the same place and with this, grown up with the same friends.
Sure. Yeah.
But I didn't. And yeah, and then coming back to Cleveland after I graduated university in Canada. So essentially I'm making new friends, and it was just different. So I didn't have that, essentially.
Well, it's like I went off to college. I grew up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, went off to college 8 hours away in Wisconsin, knew nobody. So I could totally reinvent myself. I mean, I didn't, but I could see where, well, nobody knows and nobody will ever know that, whatever it was. So it's kind of the same sort of a thing.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Now, how does faith shape your approach to leadership, decision-making, building your business?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're very active. You have lots of programs going on. So I don't mean to interrupt. Ask a question, I interrupt, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah. So it's very different when you are a believer in Christ. You recognize like your life is not your own. So you're not meant to make decisions on your own, in a sense of like, you're not the master of your own destiny, essentially. Like, and you've come to and that's a big stumbling block, honestly, for people. when I was atheist, like I was like, I don't want someone telling me what to do. Like I want to make the decisions. I want to be in the driver's seat. So it's a challenge sometimes to come to that place of recognizing, no, I'm not actually in the driver's seat, but there's also so much peace that comes with it, because if you start to think about, if you are responsible for everything, the good and the bad, that's a lot of pressure. So as a business owner, I recognize that the decision making and the building of the business needs to be directed by God and not me. And it's challenging. It's not easy. Sometimes it's easy to slip into putting myself in the driver's seat, because faith, when you're doing things from a place of faith, it's not operating by sight, right? By definition, faith is walking not by sight. It's by walking on things you can't see and trusting that it's all going to work out. So it's very challenging, but it's also good. Like when you learn to persist through that, then you start to have like your relationships with people change in the business space. It also impacts your confidence as well, because if I'm trying to show up in business spaces based on my abilities and the results I've gotten, well, what happens if something shakes that confidence, right? Then it's going to be much harder to show up in spaces. Or it will often send people into scramble mode. That's where hustle comes from. Because if it's all on you, if your results are all on you, then it's on you to run as hard and fast as you can instead of step back and trusting like there are specific places and specific ways that you are meant to show up. And then that is going to lead to the fruit that you'll see in your business.
Well, we know each other. I follow you. I'm on your email list. You seem to be very busy.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see somebody saying, well, I guess I would have thought, okay, how does she find clients?
Mm-hmm.
How many people are really out there that would lean into this?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the answer is, like I said earlier, there's somebody for everybody. There's 8 billion people on the planet. There's enough for you to have a business.
Yes.
And really, you had me speak at one of your programs. I mean, they are, I want this to sound the wrong way. They're just normal people, right? I mean, it's not, well, I mean, it's not a cult, right? I mean, it's not a, everybody's got a tattoo on their forehead kind of a thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
not that at all. And I think people have misconceptions about whatever.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you mentioned, like, can you really build a business on the fact that you say you're for Christians? I remember through one of the coaching certification programs that I went through, I was at a conference and they had shared that someone had built their coaching business around serving clowns. Like, yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
And you think about, I mean, it sounds kind of funny. How many clowns, like legit clowns, not people that you say, oh, they're such a clown, but how many clowns would you say are in the world? Well, a lot less clowns than there are Christians. Although I know some people might be like, Christians are a bunch of clowns. But anyway, if someone can build a business, like a 6-figure business, serving a very, very niched audience, then yes, you can build, if you are meant to serve that people group, you will build a business around it. And I think one of the reasons why there can be that perception, especially because I know we connected on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is a lot less overt in faith. Facebook and Instagram, like other social media platforms, it's a lot easier to see clearly who is Christian and who isn't. I think because in the business space, it has historically been taboo to bring your faith into that space, right?
Right. Yeah.
People aren't, I would say it's almost like you're closet Christian, or you could say stealth evangelist, right?
Yeah.
You're not being overt because that space is telling you it is not welcome here. And it is uncomfortable when I go into spaces where I don't know what the beliefs are. Like I know that saying the name of Jesus is not necessarily welcome, but I have said this in different spaces. I'm like, listen, if I'm talking about Buddha or Muhammad or anybody, nobody's going to give me pushback. And there's a reason that Jesus' name is offensive.
Yeah. No, there definitely is a double standard.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there just is. And
Yes.
I don't think that's anything new. That's,
Mm-hmm.
that's just through time. And I mean, even Christians don't get along, right? I mean, it's just, different.
Not fun, yeah.
Yeah. I'll talk to other Christians, and I'm Catholic, and you kind of get an odd look, like,
Mhm.
hey,
Mhm.
we're both primates. I don't know what the big deal is here,
Mhm.
but you're going to have that. Well, how do you feel it helps you in networking and getting networked?
Mhm. Yeah, so a couple ways. When I go into a room where it's not overtly Christian, right? I know that the fact that I am saying I'm for Christian business owners, if there is a Christian in the room, they're like, oh, okay. So it does a couple things. One, if someone is looking to work with a business coach and they're Christian and they want their faith to be part of it, well, it would be natural for them to seek me out in that space. The other thing that I've noticed that it does is it actually gives people who are Christian in the room, it seems like they feel like they have permission to actually share about their faith, whereas before they would have kept that closer to their chest.
Right.
So again, it's not comfortable for necessarily for me, but God has not called us to live a life of comfort necessarily. It's like, no, this is how you're supposed to show up. And these are the places you're supposed to show up in. And then just be yourself, like own who you are and who you've been called to serve.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's going to make some people uncomfortable. You've acknowledged your own discomfort, but it's going to make
Mhm.
some people uncomfortable. Um, but I think it's also going to bring it out in other people and saying, oh my gosh, Andrea's, she's somebody I can really talk to about,
Mhm.
maybe they're going through their own questioning like you went through.
Yes.
Okay, I can have this conversation,
Yeah.
and you know, you, they walk into any room and they probably assume that nobody is, you know, nobody is overt, or nobody's going to talk about it like that.
Yeah.
I've noticed a lot more. I'll use the word moniker, right?
Mhm.
Christian building, Christian financial advice, or
Mhm.
kingdom building, excuse me,
Yes.
kingdom building, and there's just a lot more of that.
Mhm.
And maybe there's more, maybe I'm just more in tune to it. I don't know what the answer is. It's kind of like when you buy a car and you think you've got the only car, and then you see it everywhere. It's
Mhm.
that reticular activation. Maybe I'm really just in tune to it being out there now. I don't know.
Yes. I think there's part of that, but the word kingdom has become more of what I would say a buzzword. It's kind of one of those words. It's not necessarily secret code, but it's almost like saying Jesus without saying Jesus,
Okay.
essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, the people that I know a financial advisor, Mike
Mhm.
Perez, I'll say his name here, and that's where he's really kind of taken his business. And um, he's just a good guy. To me, he doesn't need to have that. And I'm not just saying there's anything wrong with that, but I think what he is doing is he's advertising that there are certain people he wants to work with.
Yeah.
And I want to work with people who are comfortable having these conversations and having these beliefs.
Mhm.
And if you're not, that's okay. You don't have to work with me. I will, that's just my niche, and I'm going to build my
Mhm.
niche.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. And for something like in the financial advising area or law, especially when I would say anything where money is involved, to me that makes sense because as a Christian, if someone is saying they're kingdom or they're Christian in that area, that would communicate to me, okay, in theory, we have a shared set of values.
right.
In theory, we recognize we have a higher level of accountability. We're not just accountable to like accrediting boards or the laws, but we're accountable to God, which means like that that should make us tremble a little bit, right? It's
Yeah.
because we are going to be accountable for our actions. So when it comes to finances, as a Christian, I would look for someone who would say they're Christian and then have a conversation to see like, are those values actually there? Because when it comes to something like money, like there's so much, it's a doorway to greed or things being done in a way that is unethical,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Well,
it's
I
just
could, I
reality.
can, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. So anyway, that's why I would be looking at someone who's Christian, because it's like I want to make sure that I'm stewarding my money in a way that is not just legally above the board, but also ethical and moral from God's perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just saying it saying it is not enough, right? Talk is cheap. I
Mhm.
share the story when I was practicing law. I got sued once. I got sued by one of my clients he was very faith-based, you know. We'd have meetings, he had posters behind him and whatnot, and he did something I absolutely told him not to do. I had it in writing, don't do this, Bob. And he did it anyway, and when it all fell apart, he was just a rat on a sinking ship because he was losing everything. And it's like, okay, I'm gonna, and that really kind of shook my faith in
Mhm.
people with faith. Okay, just because somebody's saying it, it's not. But again, people aren't perfect.
Yeah.
He could have
It
been
is.
great.
Well, right. And that's the thing that's interesting about saying being Christian, because there's times where I'm like, oh, I don't even want to say it because I know all the baggage that comes with it. Again, having been an atheist and knowing what the perceptions can be. And yet we all forget like that is why we need Jesus, because we are going to screw up and sometimes screw up royally, right? In
Yeah,
ways that are going to cause pain. It's like even more confusing when it's someone who says that they're a believer, but it's like, but they're human too.
yeah,
And they need Jesus too. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. No, I was telling my wife the other day. I said, people can ridicule me because I'm, practicing Catholic or Christian, and I believe in God and Jesus, and they can ridicule me for the rest of my life. And if they're right, that's where it ends. But if
Yes.
I'm right, then they got to sit with me for eternity and listen to me. See,
Yeah.
I told you I was right. I'll be
Yeah.
here for eons telling you I was right.
Yeah.
Um,
I feel
so
like that right there is such an important point for anybody who's listening is like, that's the crux of the issue is somebody in the room is right, whether it's someone who believes in Jesus or not, because both of those can't, it's logically impossible for both of those to exist. And you're right.
right,
If there isn't a God, then yeah, we just look foolish and that's where it ends. But if there is a God and Jesus is the only way, then there is the whole eternity piece that
yeah.
we have to live with.
Well, and whether you're a believer or not a believer,
Mhm.
um, I there was a story, a personal story. I was in one of my groups, and somebody quoted Jesus. And I'm like, oh, that's a really good quote. And it didn't say it was Jesus Christ, but just gave the quote. And everyone was like, oh, that's really, really good. And there was a Jewish guy in the room, and these are all great people. And then the woman revealed, Jesus Christ said that. And the Jewish guy had said, oh, that's really, really good. And said, well, it's Jesus Christ. It doesn't mean he's God. But then her point was, her point was, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you believe or don't. It's just like, here is the path. And if
Mm.
you want to believe or not believe, that's up to you. But here's this path of caring for one another and giving before we receive and all these things and forgiveness and all those things. And that's the path. And whether you want to believe or not, that doesn't matter. But this is the path that we should
Mhm.
be on.
Yeah.
So, well, let's shift gears here. I want to um, give you an opportunity to talk about your business and what you're looking for and how people can help you that are listening in and how they can get a hold of you.
Mhm.
Because I would imagine there'll be people who have turned this off, uh, moved on to the next one, totally unsubscribed. But I'm sure there are people who are leaning in as a result as well. So,
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So business wise, I'm here to help as a business coach to help Christian business owners generate more revenue in their business, right? That's why we have business. But to do it in a way that is in alignment with God. So again, it's not we're in the driver's seat making the decisions, it's going to Him. And really, what I help my clients with is what I call tearing down strongholds. So there's when we are experiencing a plateau in revenue, maybe a dip in it, or are just at a place of like why aren't I not growing? Or why is this not working out? So that's the piece that I really help my clients solve. And it's looking at where there's strongholds, blocks that are going on and are present for them, where essentially I look at the blocks as God is trying to get your attention about something. So it usually comes down to, where are you trying to move forward in your own strength, do things apart from him? And he's trying to flag you down and say, whoa, like, let's take a step back. Let's do this together, because the results are going to be so much better. And it's not just for business, but it's for life too, because I have so many conversations with business owners that they started their business because they wanted more time and money freedom, right? To spend more time with their family, ultimately. And then ironically, the business has taken over. And so they feel less present for their family, or they're not taking care of their health. They're not taking the vacations that they said that they wanted to take. And so it's business, but it's also looking at how is business impacting life, and vice versa.
So do you do a lot of one-on-one coaching? I mean, I was in you had me speak, it was a group.
Yeah. Yes. So I do primarily one-on-one coaching, but I also have a group aspect as well, so that there's the shared value of learning from others, and growing connections at the same time. But yeah, most of the work that I do will primarily be one-on-one, because there's a certain level of listening that is required to really help identify where are the blocks. So I focus more on the mindset and underlying beliefs, like 80% of the time, and then 20% is strategy. Because most of the business owners who come to me, they already know all the strategy. Like, they essentially have, a degree in how to build a business. They've learned it. They've even created their own strategies. So they don't need more. They just need a step back. How do we refine what you've already learned how to do? What are the things you need to let go of? Maybe what are some new ideas that you haven't considered?
Right.
Try it with God and figure that out.
Well, I would imagine people are more comfortable having the one-on-one conversation, because and maybe this is true in any setting, but with respect to a group setting, I don't know if I'm going to say that thing that's not Christian enough, or too Christian, or you know what I mean? It's just like, okay, yeah. Wow, they're really overboard. And one-on-one, you don't have to worry about that so much. But
yeah, the one-on-one, there's some things that, it doesn't make sense to share in a group situation, because maybe it's more personal than makes sense. And then also, one-on-one allows you to accelerate your results, because you have someone's attention focused completely on you. It allows you to go deeper. I mean, with the group programs that I have always put together, my number one priority is to make sure it does feel like a safe space. So I usually do see my clients will open up. They're okay with getting vulnerable. It's just some things, it doesn't make sense to work through in a group format. That's where the one-on-one really comes in.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's probably true of anything, to be honest, Andrea. I've been in groups that are, not faith-based, just straight up business groups. People don't want to share their goals publicly. Some will, here's what I'm going to do. Here's my intentions. And other people are like, I didn't do the assignment. Right. So, how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so the easiest way is to go to my website, which is AndreaLeeCo.com. So, and Lee is Leigh. So AndreaLeeCo.com.
I'll get that in the show notes. Thank you for your time today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today, and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.